welcome to Ctrl+EU from the European Correspondent, where we bring you the biggest stories from the land of strong coffee and stronger regulations. I'm Ellen Morgan, and speaking of coffee, let's go and get one and catch up on what's been going on in Europe this month. First of all, after 9 years of talks, the EU finally sealed a trade agreement with Indonesia, known as a CEPA, a Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. So why now? Well, global trade is shifting fast. The US has imposed tariffs on European goods, so Brussels is looking to strengthen ties with big partners in Asia. And Indonesia is top of that list. And what's in it for Europeans? Well, prices on Indonesian palm oil, seafood, coffee and textiles will probably drop, meaning your shopping basket might get a bit cheaper. On the flip side, some European industries will face more competition from Indonesian imports, which could nudge prices up locally. The bottom line is cheaper goods for consumers, stronger EU-Indonesia ties, and a bit more resilience in a tricky global trade landscape. Next up, wool. Europe used to lead the world in wool, with generations of spinners and weavers turning raw fleece into fabric. Today, most of our wool is exported to China. European wool is shipped out, turned into coats, suits and knitwear, then sold back at prices local producers can't match. The few processing plants left in France or the Netherlands are called the resistance, but for most of Europe, raw fleece is just an export commodity. China's invested heavily in pastures, breeding and state-backed factories. It's now the world leader in production, processing and distribution, and Europe mainly consumes wool items invented there. Across the continent, frustration is growing. Farmers, spinners and designers are calling for Brussels to treat wool as a strategic raw material, sustainable, local and circular, yet undervalued. Some brands are proving it works, turning traceable, eco-certified wool into high-end luxury. The message is clear: Europe can reclaim its wool heritage, but it will take smart policies, investment, and a focus on quality over quantity. But while Europe's wool industry unravels, community cafes are stitching people and local economies back together. These are spaces where coffee isn't just a drink, it's a conversation. Urban isolation, the rise of remote work, and a hunger for connection have made these cafes more than just a place to grab a latte. They're meeting spots, co-working hubs, and cultural venues all rolled into one. For local businesses, there are benefits. These cafes create jobs, keep money circulating in neighbourhoods, and give small-scale suppliers a platform. For customers, it's about connection, sustainability, and a sense of belonging, a place where your coffee comes with a community. And finally, Europe Core is TikTok's latest aesthetic trend. Think sweeping shots of cobbled streets, sunlit terraces, and the effortless charm of cafes with outdoor seating. It's not just about fashion, it's about capturing a lifestyle. On TikTok, creators embrace this aesthetic through outfits inspired by French and Italian style, and content that evokes European summers and feeds that look cinematic. Well, in a world of fast fashion and digital overload, Europe Core taps into a desire for nostalgia and escapism, offering a more curated, romanticized version of living on the continent.
The only thing Europe loves more than its cafes are its bars, and that's proving to be a problem, especially when the industry pouring the drinks also shapes the rules. Because there's nothing more European than working in a cafe, I'm dialing in our health editor, Amalie Mersh, to unpack just how deep alcohol's grip on EU policy really goes.
Amalie, thanks so much for joining us to talk about this. I know you did so much research on Europe's relationship with alcohol for the European Correspondent, so can you tell us a bit about what your original article found?
The article focused on, I would say, the industry lobbying against health policies that target alcohol consumption. And we did that because also, as we see, there's a lack of knowledge about the harms of alcohol among people. I mean, we know it's not considered healthy, but the lack of knowledge of the actual risks is quite low among a lot of people. And what health organizations are then saying is that you have an industry which is very focused on, its profits and is working very hard to counter these public health policies. And they would like to be able to keep them out of it. So health policies are actually focused on health and not business interests.
Across Europe, it's fair to say alcohol still enjoys a pretty positive public image, even though we all know it's bad for us. So why is that?
It's very much embedded into culture in, also different ways across Europe. You have a night out, you go have drinks, you want to have fun, you get introduced to it while you're growing up. I know from myself, growing up in Denmark, you see adults drink alcohol and then people start drinking quite early because that's just what you do. It's also a social element of it. Then there are things like events. You see Oktoberfest in Germany, it's just beer all day, and huge ones as well. In Denmark we also have a day in November called Jolde, which is the Danish beer company Tuborg, which is managed to create a whole thing, an event, a day around the release of its Christmas beer, and people actually go out and celebrate it, and it has merchandise and everything. It's in a lot of places, whether it's the industry itself pushing some things or it's sort of something you've grown up with and just what you do. And yeah, as I said, it's to have fun, wind down, relax, those sorts of things. And I don't think you should talk the social element completely down because for a lot of people that's also quite important, but again, it's not healthy. So we don't actually really know the extent of the harm. I mean, there's evidence and studies out there about how little people know about the risks for certain diseases, and particularly like breast cancer in women, for example. There's a major knowledge gap. So this is not to sort of say don't ever have a drink again if you want that. The issue is that you also need to know what it is you're consuming. And of course, then there's also this, for many people, like a hidden harm, you could say, of such something that's maybe more behind closed doors or not so visible on your night out, which is that it fuels things like domestic violence in some groups. And there are a lot of socio-economic factors it influences and has, in different groups of society, worse than others.
What is alcohol lobbying and how exactly does it operate across Europe today?
It's the industry having, their people or hired consultants having meetings with politicians. You also have like the EU lobby register where different companies and their lobbyists are registered, and they go and have meetings and to talk about certain policies that are coming up or underway, present their interests and, say why they want certain things to be in certain ways, basically. But it's also, producing reports, in a lot of cases also funding research, which is a bit more, I'd say, controversial when it comes to alcohol. That's also something the tobacco industry has done a lot to sort of give evidence of sorts of their views on things and think how they think it should be. So, the way we see it around Europe is also, as some examples I mentioned in the article as well, Latvia, which is the country with the highest alcohol consumption in Europe, has changed its sales hours for alcohol, and basically it's just limiting them by 2 hours a day. But there's still been a lot of discussion about how is this going to hurt small businesses and will it create job losses and stuff. So sort of the industry argument in this case goes against trying to limit sales hours. You have also in the Nordics, apart from Denmark, you have alcohol monopolies where the state has these shops, which is the only place where you can buy alcohol. And they also have limited sales hours and things like this, but they are slowly being eroded a little bit in Finland and in Sweden. Also to sort of be able to sell alcohol other places. Then you have Ireland and its cancer warning labels that have been delayed, and the arguments against that are like Trump threatening trade tariffs and businesses worried about how much money they can make and all this. But when it comes to the alcohol industry, I mean, it's huge. It's enormous. And in Europe, we can see, we have big like beer and wine producing countries. For example, like Germany is the biggest European beer producer. France, Spain, Italy in particular are really big on wine. So the industry also has massive influence on politics, culture, consumer behavior, just because of their sheer size. They have a lot of money, they can put a lot of effort into people who go and influence politicians. And I mean, they have a good case in the sense that there are a lot of jobs and the industry is big, so they contribute to the economy in that sense.
So when big producers say that regulation will hurt small winemakers and cut local jobs, is that true or just a distraction from a wider point?
So when big producers say that regulation will hurt small winemakers or create local job losses, that is always a risk when you change things and you want, basically you want less alcohol to be sold. In a sense, you want less consumption. So and it probably depends on the policy how big of an impact it would have on the industry. But the question is, like, you have to look at both sides, is to hold it up against the health gains and economic impact of then improving health. That's what you need to do.
Why is it so hard for the EU to agree on something simple like warning labels on alcohol bottles?
It's turned out not to be so easy for the EU to agree on things like health warning labels for alcohol, even though you think it might sound simple. They say they are looking into it and gathering evidence in the EU Commission. But I mean, looking at Ireland, which has actually tried, it's proven quite difficult. They managed to agree on adding cancer warnings to alcohol by next year, but suddenly around the summer time, I think June, they suddenly decided to postpone it until 2028 so far. And I mean, they argued Trump's trade tariffs that might hit them, and businesses. There's been an investigation out recently looking into the meetings, the lobbying meetings, both in Ireland, in Brussels, and even in Washington against these warning labels. So basically an enormous lobbying campaign against health warnings in Ireland specifically, and it goes quite wide. It's the EU Commission has been lobbied. The US government has been encouraged to put pressure on politicians in Dublin to postpone this or get rid of it. Science has been funded by the industry in order to convince them of or downplaying the health risks of alcohol as well. And I mean, there's maybe a reason for this, because if the alcohol industry is not interested in having EU-wide health labels on alcohol, and then Ireland is here being the first country to add cancer warnings, they could set some sort of precedent for the rest of the continent. So that's the reason for I think the enormity of this campaign. But it's also being accused again of mimicking big tobacco lobbying in terms of downplaying risks, basically saying it's not as bad, or we don't really need this. So I mean, that's quite concerning, I would say.
How much influence does the alcohol industry have over EU law and policy? Is it more than we think?
The alcohol industry has a lot of influence on EU laws and health policy, and I think it is more probably than what people realize. We had in 2021, the EU's Beating Cancer Plan came out, and it had various promises on alcohol to do with taxation, health warnings and labelings, and a number of other things. And basically, none of it's really come to anything much. And there has been talk about sort of lobbying, and it is a bit hard to find out exactly how it's happened. The Commission says it's sort of working on some of the things still, but these are promises back from 2021, basically. So they've had a lot of time so far. And basically the alcohol industry has as much access to politicians and institutions as any other industry, and that also includes access on lawmakers who are looking at public health policies. And that's exactly what experts and health organizations are questioning, because should they have that access, considering the risks that alcohol then has on people's health? Because they're comparing it to the tobacco industry, where there are much stricter rules on access. You have the WHO agreement that basically sort of, given that people or institutions apply it properly, bar tobacco lobbyists from having influence on health policies. That doesn't entirely happen in real life, but that's the idea of it, at least. And some people are saying that it should be the same for alcohol.
Across Europe, there are wines and beers that are treated as cultural heritages. Do you think this is right, or should they be treated as health hazards?
Whether wine or beer should be treated as cultural heritage is a very good question. I mean, a lot of countries have different types of alcohol that they consider something from there. I mean, in Denmark we have snaps, this very clear liquor. I can't stand it. It's very strong. Goes with all Christmas lunches, and it's like that a lot of places. You even have alcohol that's more protected, like champagne in France has to be from the Champagne area. And I'm sure there's a lot of differing opinion on whether to sort of protect certain things as cultural heritage, like you do with different like foods and stuff. But I think labeling it and protecting it with a cultural heritage label is like embedding it even further into culture than it already is. You give it even more protection. So I'm not sure it's necessarily a good idea from the health perspective, but I think whether you do that or not, like the important thing here is the knowledge. Like people need to know what risks are attached to what they drink, for example, and then they can choose from then what they actually want to do, whether they want to drink it or not.
Finally, moving forward, does the way that we talk about alcohol need to change?
And it's never a bad idea to listen to public health experts. I mean, they know the facts, they know the risks, and you know it should be the facts that are setting, you know, the foundation of how we treat alcohol in terms of public health, in my opinion at least. Because I mean, you can talk about a lot about, you know, going out, having a fun night out and drinking and these things, but there are some quite serious issues that alcohol also fuels, and it does strain health budgets quite significantly. So, I mean, there are many different considerations to look at here, and it's going to be like, if you look at the cultural aspect, it's going to be very difficult to, you say, change that. I mean, cultural changes are extremely difficult and take ages and decades, and alcohol is being passed down from generation to generation, you know, all the alcohol uses. So if you want to change behavior in that way, that takes some very sort of you need to take some very, you know, conscious, active measures yourself as well.
Amelia, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this. I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have too. Thank you. That's all from us. Don't forget to tune in next month on Ctrl+EU, where we'll delve even deeper into the stories that are shaping Europe today. In the meantime, subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media. But for now, from me and all the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.